What if losing your job didn't destroy your life, but quietly saved your marriage instead? This slow, real English story from Detroit follows a moment of failure that turned into something unexpected: deeper love, clearer communication, and a new beginning. When everything feels like it's falling apart, could that be the exact point where your real life finally starts to come together? Shock opening question. What if losing your job didn't destroy your life, but quietly saved your marriage instead? That question sounds strange, almost uncomfortable, right? Because when people talk about losing a job in the United States, especially in a city like Detroit, they don't usually smile. They talk about stress, bills, fear, and long nights staring at the ceiling. They talk about pressure. And if you're honest with yourself, maybe you've felt that pressure too. Not just about money, but about who you are when everything you built suddenly disappears. I didn't lose my job in a dramatic way. No shouting, no big scene. Just a quiet meeting, a polite voice, and a sentence that felt like a door closing somewhere deep inside my chest. We have to let you go. Simple words. Clean. Professional. But inside my mind, everything became loud. Very loud. I walked out of the building that day in Detroit, and the cold air hit my face like reality saying, "Welcome to your new life." Cars were moving, people were talking, the city was alive, but I felt completely paused. Like someone pressed a stop button on my life while the rest of the world kept going. And here's the strange part. Losing my job wasn't the thing that scared me the most. It was going home. Because when you lose something important, you don't just lose income. You lose confidence. You lose your sense of control. And sometimes, without even noticing, you start losing connection with the people closest to you. My wife was waiting at home. My children were there too. And I didn't know how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. You see, before that day, everything looked fine from the outside. Stable job. Family life. Routine. But inside, something had already started breaking long before I lost my job. And that's the part nobody talks about. In American culture, especially in busy cities like Detroit, people are taught to keep moving. Work hard. Stay productive. Don't slow down. It sounds good, but there's a hidden cost. When your life becomes only about work, you slowly forget how to communicate, how to listen, how to be present with the people you love. I thought I was doing everything right. I worked long hours. I provided for my family. I followed the rules of success. But something was missing. Conversations at home became shorter. Smiles became rarer. Silence became normal. And silence is dangerous. There's a simple idea in psychology called emotional distance. It doesn't happen suddenly. It grows quietly, like dust on a shelf you don't clean. Day by day, moment by moment, until one day you look around and realize you're not as close as you used to be. That was my life. And here's where it gets even more interesting. When I lost my job, I thought I had hit the lowest point. But science tells us something surprising. When people experience failure or loss, the brain actually enters a state of high awareness. It's like your mind is forced to wake up and ask, "What now?" This moment, as painful as it feels, is also the moment where change becomes possible. At that time, I didn't feel hopeful. I felt lost. Confused. And that's where our English story really begins. Because instead of running away from that uncomfortable silence, I did something unexpected. I slowed down. I started listening, not just to other people, but to myself. And strangely, I used English as a tool to do that. Not complicated English. Not perfect grammar. Just simple, slow sentences. I feel tired. I don't understand myself. I want to fix this. You might think learning English has nothing to do with saving a marriage. That's what I thought too. But language is not just about words. It's about connection. It's about expressing things you've been holding inside for too long. When you learn to say something clearly, even in a simple way, your brain starts organizing your emotions differently. There's research showing that putting feelings into words can actually reduce emotional stress. It's called affect labeling. Sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. When you name what you feel, it becomes easier to handle. So there I was. A man in Detroit. No job. A quiet house. A growing distance in my marriage. And a strange new habit of speaking slow, simple English to myself like I was learning life all over again. It sounds almost funny, right? But that's how change begins. Not with big, dramatic actions, but with small, almost invisible choices. I didn't know it yet, but losing my job was not the end of my story. It was the interruption I didn't ask for, but desperately needed. Because sometimes, life doesn't break you to destroy you. Sometimes, it breaks your routine, so you can finally see what was already broken. And what I discovered next, about love, communication, and the power of starting over, was something I never expected. Something that would slowly, quietly, save my marriage. But not in the way you think. Life before collapse. A strange thing about normal life is how convincing it looks from the outside. If someone had taken a photo of my life back then in Detroit, it would have looked almost perfect. A steady job, a small but warm house, 2 kids running around, and a wife who still smiled when guests came over. You could post that picture on social media and people would probably say, that's the American dream. But you and I both know something important. A picture doesn't show silence. Back then, my mornings were always the same. Wake up early, grab coffee, check emails before even saying good morning. My brain was already working before my body fully woke up. In simple English, I used to say to myself, busy day. No time. And somehow, that sentence became my identity. I am busy. I have no time. Short sentences. Easy to say. Dangerous to believe. In the United States, especially in working cities like Detroit, being busy is almost like a badge of honor. If you're always working, always tired, always chasing something, you feel important. But here's the quiet truth nobody teaches you. Being busy is not the same as being present. I didn't understand that at the time. When I came home from work, my body was there, but my mind was still somewhere else. Still thinking about deadlines, problems, numbers. My wife would talk, and I would nod. My kids would laugh, and I would smile. But inside, I was still working. Psychology calls this cognitive overload. Your brain gets so full of tasks and stress that it stops processing emotional signals properly. In simple words, you stop really listening. And when people stop feeling heard, they slowly stop talking. At first, the changes were small. My wife would ask, "How was your day?" and I'd answer, "Fine." Then I'd ask the same question, and she'd say, "Good." Short answers. Clean. Efficient. Empty. We weren't fighting. That's the tricky part. There was no big argument, no dramatic moment. Just less conversation. Less laughter. Less connection. And the human brain is very interesting here. When something feels not dangerous, your brain ignores it. No fight, no problem, right? But emotional distance doesn't work like that. It doesn't explode. It fades. Slowly. Quietly. Like a light dimming in a room where you don't notice the darkness until it's already hard to see. I remember one evening very clearly. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling on my phone, reading work messages. My son was trying to show me something he built. A small toy. Something simple. He said, "Dad, look." And I said, "1 minute." That 1 minute never came. A few minutes later, he walked away. No anger. No complaint. Just quiet. If you've ever experienced that moment, you know exactly what I mean. It doesn't hurt immediately. But later, when you remember it, it hits differently. In English, there's a simple sentence, "I missed it." Not the toy. Not the moment. The connection. And my wife? She noticed everything. In many American families, especially in modern life, both partners carry emotional weight differently. One person may stay silent. The other starts feeling alone, even when not physically alone. My wife didn't suddenly become distant. She slowly adapted to my distance. That's how relationships change. Not through one big mistake, but through many small moments that never happen. Dinner became quieter. Conversations became practical. Did you pay the bill? What time is the meeting? Don't forget tomorrow. Functional language. Survival language. But not emotional language. And without emotional language, relationships become like business partnerships. Efficient. Organized. Empty. Here's something fascinating from neuroscience. Studies show that couples who regularly share emotional experiences, simple conversations, eye contact, small jokes, build stronger neural connections with each other. It literally rewires the brain to feel closer. But when those moments disappear, the brain starts disconnecting. Not because of hate, but because of absence. And absence is subtle. I told myself everything was okay because nothing was wrong. No fights. No crisis. Just normal life. But normal life was slowly becoming disconnected life. And here's the twist. At that time, I thought my job was the most stable part of my life. I thought, at least I have work. At least I'm providing. That belief made me ignore everything else. Because in my mind, as long as I was doing my role, everything else would be fine. But life doesn't work like that. You can be successful at work and still fail at connection. You can provide everything, except presence. And presence is what people actually remember. There's a simple English phrase I learned later, being there. Not physically. Emotionally. Being there when someone speaks. Being there when someone feels. Being there without thinking about the next task. I wasn't there. Not really. And I didn't realize that my normal life was already fragile. So when the job disappeared, it didn't just remove income. It removed the one thing I used to hide everything else. My routine. My identity. My distraction. That's why losing my job felt so heavy. Not because it created a problem, but because it revealed the problems that were already there. And suddenly, I was left with something I had been avoiding for a long time. Silence at home. Real silence. The kind where you can't escape into work. The kind where you start hearing things you didn't want to hear. And that's where the real story begins to shift. Because when you can't run anymore, you either break. Or you finally start to see clearly. And what I started to see next, about my marriage, my habits, and the way I was living, was something I couldn't ignore anymore. Not this time. The day I lost everything. Imagine sitting in a quiet office where nothing looks wrong, but everything is about to change. That's how it happened. No warning music. No dramatic signal. Just a normal morning in Detroit. I remember the sky was gray, the kind of gray that feels heavy but familiar. I walked into the building like I had done hundreds of times before. Same door. Same desk. Same routine. And that's exactly why it hurt so much. Because routine creates safety. Your brain loves patterns. It tells you, if today looks like yesterday, everything is okay. That's called predictive processing. Your mind constantly predicts what will happen next to keep you calm. But that morning, the prediction failed. Around midday, I got a message, "Can you come to a meeting?" Simple. Polite. Normal. I didn't think twice. I walked into the room, and something felt different. Not wrong. Just slightly off. Two people sitting there. Quiet smiles. Too quiet. You know that feeling when your brain senses something before you understand it? That's your nervous system picking up signals faster than your thoughts. I sat down. And then it came. "We have to let you go." No long explanation. No emotional words. Just a sentence that ended a chapter of my life. In English, it sounds clean. Professional. Almost gentle. But inside your chest, it doesn't feel gentle at all. It feels like something just dropped. Hard. For a few seconds, I didn't react. That's something the brain does during shock. It pauses. It protects you from feeling everything at once. Scientists call it a freeze response. Not fight. Not flight. Just freeze. I nodded. I said something like, "I understand." But I didn't understand. Not really. Because in that moment, my mind wasn't thinking about money yet. It wasn't even thinking about the future. It was asking a much deeper question. Who am I now? That's the hidden impact of losing a job. It's not just financial. It's identity. In American culture, especially, people connect their worth with their work. You don't just say, "I work at a company." You say, "I am," and then your job title. So when the job disappears, that sentence breaks. "I am" becomes empty. I packed my things slowly. Not because I had a lot, but because I didn't want to leave too quickly. Leaving fast makes it real. Leaving slowly gives your brain time to pretend it's not happening. But reality doesn't wait. I walked out of the building holding a small box. You've probably seen that image before, in movies, in real life. It looks almost cliché. But when it's your box, it feels different. The air outside felt colder than usual. Or maybe it was just me. Cars passed by. People laughed. Someone was talking loudly on the phone. Life continued exactly the same. Except mine didn't. And here's something interesting about the human brain. When something big happens, your mind tries to find control. It asks questions. Why me? What did I do wrong? What will happen next? But sometimes, there are no clear answers. And that lack of control creates anxiety. I got into my car and just sat there. No music. No movement. Just silence. And in that silence, something unexpected started happening. I began talking to myself. Not in a crazy way. In a simple way. Slow English. I lost my job. This is real. I feel scared. Short sentences again. You might think that sounds too simple to matter. But here's the science behind it. When you describe your emotions using simple language, your brain activates the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning and control. At the same time, it reduces activity in the amygdala, the part that creates fear. In simple words, naming your feelings helps you calm down. So there I was, sitting in a car in Detroit, using basic English not to learn grammar, but to survive the moment. I am okay. I will go home. I will talk. That last sentence felt the hardest. I will talk. Because suddenly, the problem wasn't just losing my job. It was telling my wife. You'd think that would be the first thing on my mind. But it wasn't. My brain avoided it. Delayed it. Because deep down, I knew this conversation was not just about work. It was about everything we hadn't been saying for months. And now, there was no distraction left. No, I'm busy. No later. No, not now. Just reality. Driving home felt longer than usual. Every red light felt like a question. Every turn felt like a decision I wasn't ready to make. And I kept thinking one thing. This will change everything. But I didn't know how. Would it break us? Would it push us further apart? Or could it do something else? There's a concept in psychology called a disruption moment. It's when your normal pattern is broken so strongly that your brain is forced to reevaluate everything. These moments are uncomfortable. Painful. But they are also powerful. Because for the first time in a long time, you can't stay on autopilot. You have to choose. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel inspired. I felt exposed. Like someone removed the one thing I used to hide behind. And as I parked my car in front of my house, I realized something I had been avoiding for a long time. Losing my job didn't just take something away. It revealed something. The distance. The silence. The disconnection. And now, I had no excuse not to face it. I took a deep breath. Opened the door. And stepped into a moment that would either break my family. Or quietly begin to rebuild it. But not in the way I expected. Because what happened inside that house was not anger. Not shouting. Not even what I was afraid of. It was something much more uncomfortable. Something much harder to escape. Something that would force me to finally listen. Really listen. Silent distance at home. You'd expect shouting. You'd expect questions like, what happened, or why didn't you tell me earlier? Maybe even anger. That's what movies teach us, right? Big reactions. Loud emotions. Clear conflict. But real life is quieter than that. When I opened the door that day, my house looked exactly the same. The lights were on. The smell of dinner was in the air. My kids were in the living room. My wife was in the kitchen. Everything looked normal. And somehow, that made it harder. Because when the outside stays the same, the inside feels even more different. I stood there for a second longer than usual. Just watching. Listening. My brain was searching for the right moment to speak. But here's the truth, there is no perfect moment for difficult conversations. Your brain just delays it to protect you from discomfort. I finally said it. I lost my job. Simple sentence. 4 words. Clear. And then, silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the comfortable kind. The heavy kind. My wife didn't react immediately. She didn't shout. She didn't panic. She just stopped moving for a moment. Then she nodded slightly and said, "Okay." That was it. No drama. Just okay. And somehow, that felt worse than anger. Because anger is loud. You can respond to it. You can defend yourself. You can explain. But silence? Silence makes you sit with your thoughts. And your thoughts can be brutal. We sat down for dinner like nothing had changed. The kids were talking about their day. School, friends, small stories. I tried to listen. I really did. But my mind kept repeating the same sentence. I lost my job. Again and again. There's something important happening in moments like this. When stress is high, your brain enters what psychologists call narrow focus mode. It zooms in on the problem and blocks out everything else. That's why I couldn't fully hear my kids. Not because I didn't care, but because my brain was overloaded. After dinner, the house became quiet. The kids went to their rooms. The TV was off. No background noise. Just me and my wife sitting in the same space, but not really together. This is where emotional distance becomes visible. Not through actions, but through absence. I wanted to say more. I wanted to explain how I felt. But I didn't know how. So I stayed quiet. And she stayed quiet too. 2 people. Same room. Different worlds. There's a simple English sentence that describes this perfectly. We stopped talking. Not completely. Not suddenly. But enough to feel it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. This silence didn't start that day. It had been building for months. Maybe longer. Losing my job didn't create the distance, it revealed it. And now, without work to distract me, I had to face it directly. At one point, my wife finally spoke. "What are you going to do now?" It was a normal question. A practical question. But the way she said it felt distant. Not cold. Not mean. Just careful. Like she was choosing her words very slowly. I answered quickly. "I'll find something." Short sentence. Confident tone. But inside? I wasn't confident at all. And she knew it. That's the thing about long relationships. You can say one thing, but the other person feels something else. Communication is not just words. It's tone, timing, body language. And we were out of sync. Completely. There's a concept in relationship psychology called emotional misalignment. It happens when two people are experiencing different emotional realities at the same time. One person might feel fear. The other feels uncertainty. But instead of sharing those feelings, they protect themselves. And protection creates distance. That night, we went to bed earlier than usual. Not because we were tired, but because we didn't know what else to do. Lying in the dark, I could feel the space between us. Not physical space. Emotional space. It felt bigger than the room. I stared at the ceiling, and my mind started replaying everything. The job. The meeting. The silence at dinner. Her voice. And then another thought appeared. A dangerous one. Maybe this is falling apart. That thought didn't come from logic. It came from fear. But fear feels real. Very real. There's something the brain does when it feels uncertain. It starts predicting worst-case scenarios. It's a survival mechanism. If you imagine the worst, you think you can prepare for it. But in relationships, that mechanism creates more distance. Because instead of reaching out, you pull back. I turned slightly, thinking about saying something. Anything. I'm sorry. I'm scared. I need you. But none of those sentences came out. Because saying them would mean being vulnerable. And vulnerability feels risky when you're not sure how the other person will respond. So I stayed quiet. Again. And that's how distance grows. Not through big decisions. But through small silences. Over time. Here's something powerful I didn't understand back then. In healthy relationships, it's not the absence of problems that creates closeness. It's the presence of communication. Even imperfect communication. Even simple words. Even broken sentences. But we had stopped doing that. And now, we were paying the price. The next morning felt different. Not dramatic. Just heavier. We moved around each other like careful strangers. Polite. Respectful. Distant. And in that moment, I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. If I didn't change something soon, I wouldn't just lose my job. I would lose something much more important. My connection. My family. My marriage. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because the solution didn't come from a big conversation. It didn't come from advice. It didn't even come from trying harder. It came from something small. Something simple. Something almost invisible. A habit that started with just a few slow English sentences. And somehow, that small change began to do something I didn't think was possible. It started breaking the silence. English became my escape. It sounds almost ridiculous when I say it now. I didn't fix my life first. I didn't fix my marriage first. I started with English. Not advanced English. Not perfect grammar. Not big vocabulary. Just slow, simple, almost childlike sentences. And somehow, that became my escape. But not the kind of escape you're thinking about. Not running away. More like, finally stopping. After that quiet night, something inside me felt different. Not better. Just more aware. The silence in the house wasn't just there anymore, it felt loud. Every small moment felt heavy. Even simple things like sitting at the table or making coffee felt uncomfortable. That's what happens when your brain no longer has distractions. It starts showing you everything you've been avoiding. And most people, in that situation, do one of two things. They distract themselves again, scrolling, watching, working, anything. Or they shut down, emotionally, mentally, completely. I almost did both. But then something small happened. The next morning, instead of checking my phone immediately, I just sat there. Quiet. And without thinking too much, I said something out loud. I feel strange. That was it. 3 words. No one was listening. No one was judging. Just me. And something interesting happened. I didn't feel worse. I felt clearer. There's a simple psychological principle called self-verbalization. When you speak your thoughts, in a way, it turns chaos into structure. So I tried again. I am worried. I don't know what to do. I feel lost. Short sentences. Very simple. But each sentence felt like opening a small window in a closed room. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe a little. That's when I realized something unexpected. English wasn't just a language anymore. It became a tool. A tool to understand myself. You see, when you use your native language, your thoughts can become automatic. Fast. Emotional. Sometimes overwhelming. But when you use a second language, especially simple English, you slow down. You think more carefully. You choose your words. And in that process, you become more aware. There's actual research behind this. Psychologists have found that thinking in a second language can reduce emotional bias. It creates a small distance between you and your feelings, which helps you see things more clearly. That's exactly what I needed. Distance. Not from my family, but from my own chaos. So I created a small habit. Every day, I would speak to myself in simple English for a few minutes. No pressure. No rules. Just honesty. I am scared about money. I miss talking to my wife. I want to fix this. At first, it felt awkward. Even a little stupid. But something strange started happening. Those simple sentences became easier to say than my real thoughts. Because they were simpler. Cleaner. Less dramatic. And that made them less scary. Instead of thinking, my life is falling apart, I would say, I have a problem. See the difference? One feels overwhelming. The other feels manageable. Language shapes emotion. That's not just a theory, it's how your brain works. The words you choose influence how you experience reality. So without realizing it, I was slowly changing my internal world. Not by fixing everything, but by describing it differently. And here's where it gets even more interesting. After a few days of doing this, I noticed something during conversations with my wife. I was listening more. Not perfectly. Not completely. But more than before. Why? Because my brain was already practicing slow processing. When you train yourself to speak in simple, clear sentences, you also train yourself to understand others more clearly. I started noticing her tone. Her pauses. The things she didn't say. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to respond. I just listened. There's a powerful communication concept called active listening. It sounds simple, but it's rare. It means you're not just waiting to speak, you're actually trying to understand. And somehow, learning English helped me do that. Not directly, but indirectly. Because it slowed me down. And when you slow down, you notice more. One evening, something small but important happened. My wife said something about her day. Normally, I would just nod and move on. But this time, I paused. And I answered differently. I understand. That sounds hard. Simple sentence. Very basic English. But it was real. And she looked at me differently. Not surprised. Not emotional. Just aware. Like she noticed a small change. That moment didn't fix everything. It didn't solve our problems. But it did something important. It broke the pattern. Because patterns are powerful. If you repeat the same behavior long enough, it becomes your relationship. But if you change even one small thing, the pattern starts to shift. And that's exactly what was happening. Slowly. Quietly. Almost invisibly. I wasn't trying to save my marriage yet. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just learning how to speak. Again. But this time, not just English. Emotions. Clarity. Honesty. And the most surprising part? The more I practiced these small, simple sentences alone, the easier it became to use them with someone else. But I still had a long way to go. Because listening is one thing. Understanding is another. And what I was about to discover next, about daily habits, small actions, and how tiny changes can completely shift your life, was something I never expected. Because it wasn't one big decision that changed everything. It was something much smaller. Something you might ignore. Something that takes just a few minutes a day. But somehow, it started rebuilding everything. Small daily practice. Most people think change needs to feel big. Like a powerful decision. A dramatic promise. A moment where you say, from today, everything will be different. It sounds exciting. It feels strong. And it almost never lasts. Because your brain doesn't trust big changes. It resists them. There's a concept in neuroscience called cognitive resistance. When you try to change too much, too fast, your brain sees it as a threat. It pushes back. It creates excuses. It makes you tired. Not because you're weak, but because your system wants stability. So here's the truth I learned the slow way. Big change doesn't fix your life. Small habits do. And for me, everything started with something so simple, it almost felt meaningless. 5 minutes. That's it. Every morning, before anything else, I would sit down and speak simple English out loud for 5 minutes. No phone. No distraction. No pressure. Just me and my thoughts. I feel better today. I still feel worried. I want to talk to my wife. Some days, the sentences were clear. Some days, they were messy. But I kept going. Because consistency matters more than perfection. There's a powerful psychological principle called habit stacking. It means you attach a new habit to something you already do. So I connected my English practice to my morning coffee. Coffee first. Then English. Same place. Same time. Every day. And slowly, something started changing. Not outside. inside. At first, it was just clarity. My thoughts felt less chaotic. Instead of feeling everything at once, I could separate things. This is fear. This is stress. This is regret. And when you can separate your emotions, you can handle them better. That's emotional regulation. And here's the interesting part. Emotional regulation is one of the strongest predictors of relationship success. Not intelligence. Not money. Not even communication skills. The ability to manage your own emotions. And I was building that skill, without even realizing it. Just by speaking simple English every morning. But I didn't stop there. I added one more small habit. At night, before going to bed, I would think about one moment from the day. Just one. And I would describe it in English. Very simply. Today, I listened more. Today, I felt angry. Today, I stayed quiet. No judgment. No analysis. Just observation. There's a concept in psychology called self-reflection. When you look at your behavior without judging it, you create awareness. And awareness is the first step to change. Most people skip this step. They try to fix things without understanding them. But you can't change what you don't see. So day by day, I started seeing more. Not just my thoughts. My actions. My reactions. My patterns. And one pattern became very clear. I avoided difficult conversations. Not because I didn't care. But because I didn't feel ready. And that realization hit me hard. Because waiting to feel ready is a trap. Your brain always wants more certainty. More safety. More confidence. But those things don't come before action. They come after. So I made a small decision. Not a big one. Just small enough to not scare my brain. I would say one honest sentence to my wife each day. Just one. Not a long conversation. Not a deep discussion. One sentence. That's it. The first time, it felt uncomfortable. I feel a little stressed today. That was all I said. She nodded. No big reaction. But something changed. The next day, I said another sentence. I'm trying to think more clearly. Again, simple. Again, real. And slowly, something started happening between us. The space didn't disappear. But it felt less heavy. Because even one honest sentence can break silence. And silence, once broken, becomes easier to break again. There's a communication principle that says, frequency builds safety. The more often you communicate, even in small ways, the safer the connection feels. And safety is what allows deeper conversations later. I wasn't trying to solve everything anymore. I was just showing up. In small ways. Consistent ways. Real ways. And here's something surprising. My wife started responding differently too. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But subtly. She began sharing a little more. Not everything. Just small things. Her day. Her thoughts. Her feelings. And for the first time in a long time, our conversations didn't feel forced. They felt natural. Still simple. Still short. But real. That's the power of small habits. They don't create instant transformation. They create momentum. And momentum is what changes everything. Because once something starts moving, it's easier to keep it moving. Even if it's slow. Even if it's imperfect. And here's the deeper truth. I wasn't just learning English anymore. I was learning how to live differently. How to slow down. How to notice. How to express. And those skills started affecting everything. My mood. My thinking. My relationship. But the biggest shift was still coming. Because understanding yourself is one thing. Understanding someone else is another level. And what I discovered next, about my wife, her silence, and the things she had been feeling all along, was something I hadn't truly seen before. Not because it wasn't there. But because I wasn't ready to see it. Until now. Understanding my partner again. There's a moment in every relationship that doesn't look important, but changes everything. Not a big fight. Not a dramatic confession. Just a quiet realization. Mine happened on a normal evening. No music. No special event. Just the soft sound of dishes in the kitchen and the low hum of life continuing like it always does. My wife was standing by the sink, washing plates. I was nearby, doing nothing special. And for the first time in a long time, I really looked at her. Not quickly. Not automatically. Slowly. Carefully. Like I was seeing her again after forgetting who she was. That might sound strange. But it's more common than you think. When you live with someone for a long time, your brain creates shortcuts. It assumes you already know that person. So it stops paying attention. That's called cognitive familiarity. It saves energy. But it also kills curiosity. And without curiosity, connection fades. I had been living with my wife every day, but I hadn't been seeing her. Not really. And that night, something felt different. Maybe it was the days of slow English practice. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the absence of work stress. Or maybe I was finally ready. I noticed small things. The way she moved. The way she paused between actions. The slight tension in her shoulders. These are things you don't see when your mind is busy. But when you slow down, they become clear. And then something unexpected happened. Instead of thinking about what to say, I just listened. Not to her words. To her silence. Because silence speaks. There's a concept in emotional intelligence called empathic awareness. It means understanding what someone feels without them saying it directly. It's not guessing. It's observing with attention. And for the first time in a long time, I was paying attention. I realized something uncomfortable. Her silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of things she hadn't said. Full of moments she had felt alone. Full of conversations we never had. That realization didn't feel good. It felt heavy. Because it meant one thing. I hadn't just been distant. I had been absent. Even when I was there. There's a simple English sentence that came into my mind. I didn't see you. I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But I felt it. And that feeling changed the way I looked at everything. For so long, I thought our problem was communication. That we needed to talk more, fix things, solve issues. But now I understood something deeper. We didn't just need more words. We needed better presence. Because you can talk a lot and still not understand each other. But if you truly listen, even a few words can be enough. That night, I said something small. Not perfect. Not dramatic. Just real. You look tired. She paused. Turned slightly. And for a second, I saw something in her eyes. Not surprise. Not sadness. Recognition. Like she was thinking, you noticed. And that moment mattered more than I expected. Because being seen is powerful. There's research showing that feeling emotionally seen activates the brain's reward system. It creates a sense of safety, connection, and trust. It's not about solving problems. It's about being acknowledged. And I had forgotten how to do that. We didn't have a deep conversation that night. No big emotional breakthrough. Just small exchanges. Simple sentences. But something shifted. The space between us didn't disappear. But it felt softer. And that softness gave me courage. The next day, I tried something new. Not big. Just intentional. I asked her a question. But not a practical question. Not what are we doing today, or did you pay the bill? A real question. How are you feeling? Simple. Direct. But different. She didn't answer immediately. And that pause used to make me uncomfortable. I would rush to fill it. Change the topic. Avoid the silence. But this time, I waited. Because I had learned something important. Silence is not the enemy. Avoidance is. After a few seconds, she answered. Just tired. Short answer. But real. And instead of moving on, I stayed. I understand. Again, simple English. Again, honest. And something in her expression softened. That's when I realized something powerful. Understanding doesn't require perfect words. It requires attention. And attention is a skill. A skill I was slowly rebuilding. Through small habits. Through slow language. Through presence. But here's the deeper shift. I stopped seeing my wife as the other person in the problem. And started seeing her as someone experiencing her own version of the same situation. Different thoughts. Different emotions. But the same reality. We were both dealing with uncertainty. Both feeling distance. Both unsure how to fix it. But instead of facing it together, we had been facing it alone. And that's what creates disconnection. Not conflict. Isolation. There's a psychological idea called shared emotional experience. It means going through something together, instead of separately. And it's one of the strongest ways to rebuild connection. But to get there, you need one thing first. Understanding. Not agreement. Not solutions. Just understanding. And I was finally starting to learn that. Slowly. Imperfectly. But consistently. And something unexpected was happening. The more I understood her, the less defensive I felt. The less I needed to prove anything. The less I needed to control the situation. Because understanding replaces fear with clarity. And clarity creates calm. But I still had a lot to learn. Because understanding one person is not just about emotions. It's also about context, culture, beliefs, expectations. And living in the United States, especially in a place like Detroit, comes with its own unique pressures and differences that affect relationships in ways I hadn't fully realized. What I discovered next, about culture, marriage, and the invisible rules we live by, changed the way I saw everything. Not just my relationship, but life itself. Cultural differences in marriage. Here's something most people don't expect. Sometimes, your relationship isn't just influenced by you and your partner. It's influenced by culture. Invisible rules. Silent expectations. Unspoken beliefs about what love, marriage, and family are supposed to look like. And if you don't notice them, they quietly control everything. Living in the United States, especially in a city like Detroit, taught me that relationships here move differently. Faster in some ways. More direct. More individual. At first, I didn't think culture mattered that much. Love is love, right? Two people care about each other, build a life, raise a family. Simple. But real life is never that simple. Because love doesn't exist in isolation. It exists inside a system. And that system shapes how you speak, how you argue, how you show care, even how you stay silent. Back when everything felt normal, I followed a very clear belief. My job is to provide. That was my definition of being a good partner. Work hard. Earn money. Support the family. And in many cultures, that idea makes sense. But in modern American life, especially in relationships, that's only part of the equation. Because here, emotional presence is not optional. It's expected. And I didn't fully understand that. So while I thought I was doing my role correctly, my wife was experiencing something completely different. She wasn't just looking for stability. She was looking for connection, conversation, partnership. And when those things were missing, it didn't matter how hard I worked. There was still a gap. That's the tricky thing about cultural expectations. They're not always spoken, but they are always felt. There's a concept in social psychology called cultural scripts. These are the unwritten rules that guide behavior. You don't learn them from a book. You absorb them from your environment. And when two people have slightly different scripts, misunderstanding begins. Not because anyone is wrong, but because the expectations don't match. Looking back, I can see it clearly now. When my wife wanted to talk, she wasn't just sharing information. She was trying to connect. When I gave short answers, I thought I was being efficient. She felt I was being distant. Same moment. Different meaning. And that difference created tension. But not loud tension. Quiet tension. The kind that builds slowly. One evening, after days of practicing small English sentences and trying to be more present, I noticed something interesting during a conversation. She was telling me about her day. Normally, I would listen for the problem and try to fix it. That's what many people do. Hear a problem, give a solution. Simple. But this time, I didn't rush. I just listened. And then I said something different. That sounds frustrating. No solution. No advice. Just acknowledgement. And her reaction? She kept talking. That's when it clicked. She didn't need me to fix everything. She needed me to understand. There's actual research that shows in many relationships, especially in American culture, emotional validation is more important than problem solving in daily communication. In simple terms, people want to feel heard before they want to be helped. And I had been skipping that step for years, without realizing it. Another difference I started noticing was how conflict works. In some cultures, avoiding conflict is seen as respect. You stay quiet. You don't create tension. But in many American relationships, avoiding conflict can be seen as avoidance, or even disinterest. People expect you to speak, to express, to engage. Not aggressively, but honestly. And I had been avoiding that, thinking I was keeping peace. But actually, I was creating distance. Because silence doesn't solve problems. It delays them. And delayed problems grow. So I started experimenting. Not big conversations. Just small honesty. I don't understand this. I feel unsure. I want to try better. Simple sentences again. But now, directed outward. And slowly, something changed. Our conversations became more balanced. Not perfect. But real. And here's something even deeper. I started understanding that my wife wasn't just reacting to me. She was also responding to the environment around her. Life in the United States can be stressful, fast-paced, demanding. People carry a lot, work pressure, social expectations, family responsibilities. And all of that affects how they show up in relationships. So when she felt distant, it wasn't just about me. It was about everything. And that realization changed how I saw her. Less as someone pulling away. More as someone managing her own weight. Just like me. That shift, from blame to understanding, is powerful. Because blame creates walls. Understanding creates bridges. And we were slowly starting to build one. Not a big bridge. Not a strong one yet. But something. And something is enough to begin. There's a simple English idea that stayed with me during this time. Same situation. Different perspective. We were living in the same house. Facing the same problem. But experiencing it differently. And until I understood her perspective, I couldn't truly connect with her. But now, things were changing. Not dramatically. Not quickly. But steadily. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something new. Not confidence. Not certainty. Just possibility. The possibility that things could improve. That we could reconnect. That this situation wasn't the end, but a turning point. However, understanding culture and communication was only part of the journey. Because there was still something we hadn't done yet. Something important. Something that would test everything I had learned so far. A real conversation. Not small sentences. Not simple exchanges. But a moment where everything had to be said. Honestly. Clearly. Together. And that moment was coming closer than I expected. The turning point conversation. There's a strange moment right before a real conversation begins. Not small talk. Not polite sentences. A real conversation. It feels like standing at the edge of something. You can step forward or step back. And for a long time, I kept stepping back. But not that night. It didn't happen in a perfect setting. No soft music. No planned we need to talk moment. Just an ordinary evening in Detroit. The kids were asleep. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like an invitation, or a warning. I was sitting on the couch, thinking. Not scrolling. Not distracting myself. Just thinking. That alone was new. And then something simple happened. My wife sat down across from me. Not next to me. Across. That small detail mattered. Because distance shows up in space before it shows up in words. We didn't speak immediately. And this time, the silence felt different. Not heavy. Not empty. Just waiting. There's a concept in psychology called emotional readiness. It's the point where your internal pressure becomes stronger than your fear of discomfort. That's where I was. Not fearless. Just ready enough. So I started. Not with a speech. Not with a perfect sentence. Just something real. I think we've been distant. Simple. Clear. Honest. My voice wasn't strong. But it didn't need to be. Because truth doesn't need volume. She didn't respond right away. And this time, I didn't panic. I let the silence exist. Because I had learned something important. Silence is not rejection. Sometimes, it's processing. After a few seconds, she nodded. I feel that too. 4 words. But those 4 words changed everything. Because for the first time in a long time, we were in the same reality. Not separate experiences. Shared truth. And shared truth creates connection. Even if the truth is uncomfortable. That's the paradox. You don't build closeness by avoiding hard things. You build it by facing them, together. I took a breath. And continued. I didn't see it before. That sentence felt heavier. Because it carried responsibility. Not blame. Just ownership. There's a difference. Blame says, you caused this. Ownership says, I was part of this. And ownership opens doors. Blame closes them. She looked at me more directly now. And I could see something in her expression. Not anger. Not sadness. Something softer. Recognition. Maybe even relief. So I kept going. Not perfectly. But honestly. I was busy, but I wasn't really here. That sentence stayed in the air for a moment. Because it was true. And truth has weight. But it also has power. There's research showing that vulnerability, real, honest expression of thoughts and feelings, activates trust in relationships. It signals safety. It tells the other person, you don't have to defend yourself here. And for the first time in a long time, I was offering that. Without realizing it fully. She took a breath. And then, she spoke. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Not because it was loud. But because it was quiet. And real. I didn't interrupt. Didn't defend. Didn't explain. I just listened. Because I finally understood something simple. This conversation wasn't about being right. It was about understanding. She continued. You were always busy, and when you weren't, you felt far away. Each word felt precise. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just accurate. And accuracy is hard to argue with. There's a moment in difficult conversations where your brain wants to protect you. It wants to say, that's not true. Or, I had reasons. Or you don't understand. That's called defensive response. It's automatic. But it's also destructive. Because defense blocks connection. So instead of reacting, I did something different. Something I had been practicing in small ways. I acknowledged. I understand. Simple sentence. But powerful. Because understanding doesn't mean agreement. It means recognition. Recognition of the other person's experience. And that alone can reduce tension. There's a principle in communication called validation. When people feel validated, their stress levels drop. Their brain shifts from defense mode to connection mode. And that's exactly what was happening. Slowly. Quietly. We kept talking. Not perfectly. Not smoothly. There were pauses. Moments of uncertainty. But we didn't stop. Because stopping is what creates distance. Continuing, even imperfectly, is what rebuilds it. At one point, I said something I hadn't planned. I was scared. That sentence surprised even me. Because I hadn't said it out loud before. Not clearly. Not directly. But once it came out, it felt right. Real. And something shifted again. Because fear is honest. And honesty invites honesty. She nodded. I was too. That moment was the turning point. Not because everything was solved. But because everything became shared. Fear. Distance. Confusion. No longer separate. Together. And when problems become shared, they become easier to carry. That's the power of connection. Not removing difficulty, but reducing isolation. We didn't fix everything that night. No big decisions. No perfect plan. Just understanding. And sometimes that's enough to begin. Because once you understand each other, everything else becomes possible. And as the conversation slowly came to an end, something felt different. Not lighter. Not perfect. But aligned. Like we were finally facing the same direction. After a long time. But here's the interesting part. That conversation didn't magically fix our marriage. It didn't solve all our problems. It did something more important. It created a foundation. A new starting point. And what we built on that foundation, in the days that followed, would change everything. Because understanding is powerful. But action is what transforms it into something real. And what we did next, together, was something small. Something simple. But strong enough to rebuild what we almost lost. Rebuilding with love. You might expect that after a deep conversation, everything suddenly becomes easy. It doesn't. There's no background music. No emotional montage. No instant transformation where two people wake up the next day and suddenly understand everything perfectly. Real change is quieter than that. It's slower. And honestly, it's a little awkward at first. The morning after our conversation felt different, but not dramatically different. The house looked the same. The routine was still there. The problems hadn't disappeared. But something subtle had shifted. We were no longer avoiding each other. That alone was new. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called micro-repair. It refers to small actions that rebuild trust over time. Not big gestures. Not dramatic apologies. Small, consistent signals that say, I'm here. I'm trying. That became our focus. Not fixing everything. Just showing up, a little better than yesterday. That morning, I made coffee. Nothing special about that, right? Except this time, I didn't just make it for myself. I made one for her too. And when I gave it to her, I didn't say anything complicated. Just, I made this for you. Simple English. Simple action. But it meant something. Because intention matters. She looked at the cup, then at me, and gave a small smile. Not big. Not emotional. But real. And in relationships, real beats perfect every time. That's how rebuilding started. Not with big promises. But with small presence. Over the next few days, we didn't try to have another big talk. We didn't force deep conversations. Instead, we focused on everyday moments. Dinner. Walking around the neighborhood. Sitting in the same room without distractions. These moments used to feel empty. Now, they felt like opportunities. Because connection doesn't require special events. It requires attention. There's something interesting about the human brain. When you repeat small positive interactions, your brain starts associating the other person with safety again. This is called positive reinforcement. In simple terms, small good moments, repeated often, rebuild trust. And we were creating those moments. Slowly. One evening, we went for a walk. Nothing planned. Just a decision. The air in Detroit was cool. The streets were quiet. And for a few minutes, we didn't talk. But this silence felt different. Not heavy. Not distant. Just calm. And then she said something small. I like this. 3 words. But they carried something deeper. Comfort. And comfort is a sign of safety. I responded simply. Me too. And that was enough. We didn't need to fill every moment with words anymore. Because the connection was slowly returning. But rebuilding a relationship isn't just about 2 people. It's also about the environment you create, especially when you have children. Our kids didn't understand everything that had happened. But they felt the difference. Children are very sensitive to emotional changes. Even if they don't know the details, they notice tone, energy, presence. And for a while, our home had felt quiet in a different way. Now, that was changing. I started doing something simple. Spending a few minutes each day fully present with them. No phone. No distraction. Just attention. Show me. Tell me. That's cool. Simple English again. But real engagement. And their response? Immediate. More talking. More laughter. More energy. That's the thing about connection, it spreads. When you improve one relationship, it affects others. Like a ripple. And our home started feeling alive again. Not perfect. But warmer. There's a powerful idea in family psychology, emotional climate. It's the overall feeling in a home. Not based on big events, but on daily interactions. And we were slowly changing that climate. From tension to ease. From distance to presence. But here's the deeper part. Rebuilding love is not just about actions. It's about mindset. Before, I thought love meant providing, solving, protecting. Now, I understood something different. Love is attention. Love is listening. Love is being there, even when things are not perfect. And that shift changed everything. Because it removed pressure. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be present. There's a simple English sentence that stayed with me during this time. I am here. Not I will fix everything. Not I have all the answers. Just I am here. And that sentence became my foundation. Of course, there were still difficult moments. Small misunderstandings. Old habits trying to come back. That's normal. Because change is not linear. It moves forward, then slightly back, then forward again. But the difference now was awareness. We noticed things earlier. We talked sooner. We didn't let silence grow for too long. And that made all the difference. One night, after the kids were asleep, we sat together again. Not for a serious conversation. Just together. And I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not excitement. Not intensity. Just quiet peace. And that's when I understood something important. Love doesn't always feel like a strong emotion. Sometimes, it feels like stability. Like calm. Like knowing you're not alone. And we were finding that again. But here's where the story takes another unexpected turn. Because while our relationship was slowly rebuilding, my external life was still uncertain. I still didn't have a job. I still didn't have a clear plan. And for most people, that pressure would destroy this progress. But for me, something different happened. Because losing my job didn't just take something away. It created space. Space to think. Space to change. Space to see new possibilities. And what I discovered next, about work, identity, and starting over, was something I never expected. Because sometimes, when one door closes, it's not just about finding another door. It's about realizing you can build your own. A new career path. There's a quiet fear that follows you after you lose a job. It doesn't shout. It whispers. What now? Not once. Not twice. But every day. And if you're not careful, that question becomes pressure. Heavy pressure. The kind that makes you rush into the first opportunity just to feel safe again. But something strange had changed in me. For the first time in a long time. I didn't rush. Not because I was confident. But because I had finally learned how to sit with uncertainty. That's not something people talk about often. In American culture, especially in fast-moving environments like Detroit, there's a strong expectation to act quickly. Fix the problem. Move forward. Don't stay stuck. But what if staying still for a moment is exactly what you need? There's a concept in psychology called tolerance for ambiguity. It's the ability to stay calm even when you don't have clear answers. Most people struggle with it. The brain wants certainty. It wants a plan. But growth often happens in that unclear space. And somehow, I had entered that space. Not comfortably, but willingly. Every morning, I continued my small habit. Coffee. 5 minutes of simple English. I don't know my next step. I am thinking. I will try something new. Those sentences didn't solve anything directly, but they changed how I approached the situation. Instead of panic, I felt curiosity. And curiosity opens doors that fear keeps closed. I started looking at my past differently. Not just as something I lost, but as something I could learn from. What did I actually enjoy about my old job? What did I not enjoy? What kind of life did I want now, not just financially, but emotionally? These questions were new. Before, I didn't ask them. I just followed the path that made sense. Work. Earn. Repeat. But now, I had space to think. And thinking led to something unexpected. An idea. Not a big one. Not a "this will change everything" idea. Just a small direction. I realized something during those weeks of practicing English and rebuilding my relationship. I enjoyed explaining things. Simple things. Clear things. I liked taking something complicated and making it easy to understand. And more importantly, I liked how it made me feel. Calm. Focused. Present. That feeling mattered. There's a concept called intrinsic motivation. It means doing something because you enjoy the process, not just the result. And studies show that people who follow intrinsic motivation tend to feel more satisfied and perform better over time. I had never really paid attention to that before. But now, it stood out. So I started small. Very small. I began recording short audio clips for myself. Simple English. Talking about my day. Explaining my thoughts. Almost like what you're hearing now. At first, it was just practice. Nothing serious. But then I had another idea. What if I share this? That thought felt uncomfortable. Because sharing means exposure. And exposure means judgment. But it also means possibility. So I tried. I uploaded a simple recording. No perfect editing. No professional setup. Just real voice. Slow English. A simple story. And then, I waited. Not expecting much. But something interesting happened. People listened. Not thousands. Not millions. Just a few. But those few responded. Comments like, "This is easy to understand. This helps me feel calm. I like your story." Short sentences. Simple feedback. But powerful. Because it showed me something important. Value doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes, simple is exactly what people need. And that realization changed everything. I wasn't just someone who lost a job anymore. I was someone who could create something. From nothing. That shift, from consumer to creator, is powerful. Because when you create, you take control. Not over everything. But over something. And that's enough to build momentum. I continued. Day by day. Recording. Speaking. Sharing. Still simple. Still slow. Still honest. And over time, it grew. Not fast. But steadily. And here's the surprising part. My confidence didn't come from success. It came from consistency. From showing up. From doing something every day. There's a principle in psychology called self-efficacy. It's your belief in your ability to handle situations. And the strongest way to build it is not through thinking, but through action. Small actions. Repeated. And that's exactly what I was doing. Meanwhile, my relationship at home continued improving. Because I was no longer carrying the same stress. Not because I had everything figured out. But because I had direction. And direction reduces anxiety. Even if the path is uncertain. One evening, my wife asked me something simple. Do you enjoy this? She meant the recordings. The speaking. The sharing. I paused. And then answered honestly. Yes. I do. That answer felt different. Not forced. Not logical. Just real. And she smiled. Not a big smile. But a genuine one. Because she could see it. I wasn't just trying to fix a problem anymore. I was building something. And that energy is contagious. It changes how you show up. How you speak. How you live. But here's the deeper truth. Losing my job didn't give me a new career. It gave me a new perspective. And that perspective allowed me to see opportunities one had ignored before. Because when your identity is fixed, your options feel limited. But when your identity shifts, possibilities expand. I was no longer just an employee. I was a learner. A communicator. A creator. And that identity felt more aligned with who I was becoming. But the story doesn't end with a new path. Because the real transformation wasn't just external. It was internal. How I saw failure. How I understood struggle. How I defined success. And what I realized next changed everything. Because what I once called my biggest loss started to feel like something else entirely. Something unexpected. Something valuable. Something like a gift. Failure became my gift. There's a version of this story where everything goes wrong. Where losing a job leads to more distance. More stress. More silence. Where a relationship slowly breaks, not because of one big moment, but because of many small ones that were never repaired. That version could have been real. Very real. But it's not the version you're hearing now. Because something changed. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But deeply. And the strange part? It all started with failure. There's a sentence I used to hate. Failure is a lesson. It sounded like something people say when they don't understand real pain. When everything feels heavy, that sentence feels empty. But now, I understand it differently. Failure is not the lesson. Failure is the interruption. The moment that breaks your pattern. And if you're willing to look closely, it shows you what you couldn't see before. For me, losing my job didn't just remove stability. It removed distraction. And without distraction, everything became clear. The silence in my home. The distance in my relationship. The habits I didn't question. All of it, visible. At first, that clarity felt uncomfortable. Almost painful. But clarity is necessary. Because you can't change what you don't see. And once I saw it, I couldn't ignore it anymore. That's where the real transformation began. Not with success. With awareness. There's a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. It describes how people can experience positive change after difficult events. Not because the event was good, but because it forced them to grow. That's what happened to me. I didn't grow because I wanted to. I grew because I had to. And that difference matters. Because forced growth is honest. It strips away excuses. It removes comfort. And it asks one simple question. Who are you now? At the beginning of this story, I didn't have a clear answer. I was someone who lost a job. Someone who felt distant at home. Someone who didn't know what to do next. But slowly, that identity changed. Not all at once. In small steps. Through simple habits. Through honest conversations. Through learning how to speak and how to listen. And now, when I think about that moment in the office, the quiet meeting, the sentence "we have to let you go," I don't feel the same weight anymore. Because that moment didn't end my story. It redirected it. There's a powerful idea I learned along the way. Your worst moment can become your turning point, if you respond differently. Not react. Respond. Reaction is automatic. Response is intentional. At first, I reacted with confusion. Fear. Silence. But over time, I started responding. With awareness. With small actions. With honesty. And those responses changed the direction of everything. My relationship didn't become perfect. No relationship does. But it became real. Stronger in a quiet way. More honest. More connected. We still have disagreements. We still have moments of distance. But now, we notice them sooner. We talk sooner. We repair faster. That's the difference. Not the absence of problems. The presence of connection. And my work? It doesn't look like it used to. There's no office like before. No fixed routine. But there's something else. Meaning. Because what I do now aligns with who I became during that difficult time. And that alignment feels different. Lighter. More sustainable. More real. But here's the most important part of this story. It's not about me. It's about you. Because maybe you're watching this right now, feeling stuck. Feeling tired. Maybe you're thinking about giving up on something. Your goals. Your learning. Your relationship. Or even yourself. And if that's where you are, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a big change. You don't need to fix everything today. You just need one small step. One honest sentence. One moment of awareness. That's how it starts. Not dramatically. Quietly. And if you're learning English, don't think of it as just language. Think of it as a tool. A way to slow down your thinking. To understand yourself. To connect with others. Because sometimes, the simplest words carry the deepest meaning. I feel. I understand. I am here. 3 simple sentences. but they can change everything. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the path. And sometimes, it's the part that shows you where you truly need to go. Because losing something can create space. And in that space, you can rebuild. Better. Stronger. More honest. More you. And maybe, just maybe, the moment you thought was the end was actually the beginning you didn't expect. What if the hardest moment of your life isn't a warning sign, but a hidden invitation? Tonight's story wasn't just about losing a job in Detroit. It was about losing direction and finding something deeper. About silence turning into understanding. About simple English sentences becoming a bridge, not just to a new language, but to a new life. And here's the truth most people never say out loud. The moment you feel like giving up is often the exact moment your story is about to change. So don't rush away from discomfort. Don't hide from uncertainty. Stay with it. Listen to it. Because inside that confusion, there's a version of you that's stronger, calmer, and more honest, waiting to be discovered. If this story made you pause, think, or feel something real, you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe now for more slow English listening practice, real-life English stories, and powerful life lessons through simple English designed for 2026 learners in the US and around the world. Like this video and share it with someone who might need this message today. Comment below, what small step will you take today? Because your turning point might already be here.